Thank you. So I'll just start with a short introduction for the few of you in the room who haven't met me previously at various networking events and WordCamps. So as Dan said, I founded Indigo Tree. I actually coded my first website Christmas Day, in the year 2000, because my husband was daft enough to buy me a book on HTML, and he cooked the turkey, and I built my first web page. And I started off as a freelancer, and we've sort of accidentally ended up as an agency, and at the moment there's 16 of us in total, and we primarily work for small and medium-sized businesses across the UK. And then a few years ago now, well, about two and a half years ago, I was thinking about website performance and had a bit of a brainworm about sustainability, and that has now turned into a WordPress plugin that is currently in sort of private beta, and we'll be launching very shortly, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about website design, and then I'm going to move on to talk more about data and websites, and then talk specifically about WordPress and some of the things we do at Indigo Tree. So some of the things, if you're a developer in the room, you might think are really obvious, but other things hopefully will just get you thinking about the impact of the way that you design and build your websites. So starting with the planet, what makes a really good website design? This is a bit like sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, sort of triangle. The bottom three, functional, reliable, and usable, everyone sort of expects that of a website. It's a bit of a given, but the way that you design your website can make a really big difference to the human who is actually trying to use it. And then at the top three, convenient, pleasurable, and meaningful, especially the meaningful bit, that's where things like sustainability come in. And when we're talking about websites with our clients at Indigo Tree, we're not just talking about usable to the customers or audiences of our clients, the people who'll be using the website and seeing the front end of it. We're also thinking about how convenient and meaningful it is for the organisation or business, and how usable it is in the back end. And like Big Byte, but not at the same scale, we're building with the block editor, because actually we find that's really helpful and quick for content editors. So it's also about how does the website perform both at the back end and the front end. And what's the impact of poor design? Well, you can end up with really disconnected experiences on a website. If pages look jarringly different, you can end up with a website that's inaccessible to someone either with a permanent or temporary impairment. You can end up with quite deceptive user experiences, and there's ways of making things deceptive deliberately to try and encourage sales of things that maybe people don't realise they're signing up to. You can have all sorts of implicit bias, and then there's things like the frustration. Often when we're looking at website performance with our clients, we're looking at what people are trying to click on and it actually doesn't do anything. How can good design help that and save that frustration for the end user? And certainly we've all sat there waiting. I love the website themes in WordPress where they design a spinner for the page load. It's like if you've actually designed a spinner, that it means I'm never ever going to use your theme, because I know it's going to be really slow. And finally, with things like privacy and data harvesting, you know, how open and transparent are you about how ethically you're stalking the people who are visiting your website? And the wider impact is all sorts of things. If your website's really, really slow and someone's on a very low-cost mobile phone, it might not have enough power to load the pages really easily, and that can cause all sorts of issues with digital exclusion. We work at Indigo with quite a few schools, and during the pandemic, we were encouraging them not to have those massive videos and banner images on their home pages, because people were visiting the site with low data plans, and if you're being really disrespectful and loading up 5 megabytes of data on that homepage, that's 5 megabytes of their data plan that they can't use for their homework or for something else as well. And if you're worldwide, like Amnesty are, then not everybody in the world who wants to visit your website is going to be on a 4G network. If they're on a 3G network, you certainly need to be really mindful of things like that. All sorts of barriers around accessibility, and that can also go into being ageist as well. So I watch my mum, who's 80, using things like the BT website, and I help her with it. She had no idea you could type into a search box and press enter to actually get the search results. She thought you then had to move the mouse and click on the search button. There's all sorts of little things that when you design a website, you don't realise that people of different generations might not interpret things in the same way. And then obviously there's things around fraud and just being really inefficient in how the website is being serviced. And that could be that it means it costs the organisation more. When BT made their website a lot more accessible, the amount of requests for Braille and information in Braille went down considerably. There's a cost to the business of delivering Braille documents to people who can't use a screen reader on a website. So how do we improve? I think that there's 3 things you need to think about when you're designing a website. Societal, making sure it's accessible, it's private, it's secure. Economic, making sure you're delighting your visitors, keeping them on the site, increasing the donations, the sales, the inquiries, making sure it's usable. And then for me, the sustainability bit, which is what I think about a lot, is all about efficiency. How can we make it really fast, really low carbon, and how can we make it as easy as possible for people to use as well? So I'm just going to talk now about data and bytes, because I'm a bit of a geek. So we've got a byte. This was a slide I saw in a really interesting talk, which I've ineptly recreated. But essentially, you start off with that really small thing, which is a byte. If you've got a document, it might be 30 kilobytes. If you've got a sound file, it's probably a number of megabytes, and sort of on and up. What's really interesting is that by 2025, I saw a stat which said that there'll be 175 zettabytes of data created, captured, and stored worldwide, just in that 1 year. It's a massive growth in data. The computing power demand is doubling every 2 months compared to every 24 months back in 2012. So when you're storing that amount of data, when everything is so much more digital, the way that data is then accessed by people requires electricity. And the fundamental thing is you don't see pollution coming out the back of my computer, but that electricity has a carbon footprint. And that's the data is sort of a proxy for carbon. So that's the sort of bit of sustainability that we're talking about when we're talking about digital and data. And this is what the sort of problem is. And at the moment, I've got some stats around, if the internet was a country, it would be the 4th largest polluter. It's actually, currently, the airline industry is about 1.8% of digital worldwide emissions. The internet at the moment is, in total, digital is about 3.7, 3.8%. By 2035, that's going to be up at 15%, according to the sort of predictions that I'm reading about. And by 2050, which is when everyone's saying we've got to get this net zero thing in, it will be about a third, will be the electricity demand, and the data will be about a third of emissions. So it's what do we do to all make a difference? And that's where I was coming from. But there is some good news. This actually popped into my inbox this morning. There was a day I think it was lunchtime last Monday, when so much of the UK's electricity for that particular hour on the Monday lunchtime was being generated by renewables, that it was the lowest ever amount of grams per... Basically, it's 19 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Really, really low. The National Grid have an amazing API. I just love a decent API. And you can literally poll it, and you can get daily averages, you can get hourly averages, you can look at demand across different regions of the UK. Because the bottom line is that on a hot, windy day in the summer, you're not burning much coal. And you're probably not even burning much gas. But in a cold, dull, cloudy day, in winter, actually the amount of fossil fuels being used to create that energy can be a lot more. And it varies by day, by weather, seasonally, all sorts of factors that take it into account. And there must have been something going on last week with the weather or something to mean that, and the demand to mean that actually the renewables could cover the energy demand for the UK, give or take, which is brilliant. The other thing about data centres is they use a lot of water. So we're coming at it very much from carbon footprint. But when you look at sustainability as a whole and the issues around climate change, water is a key thing as well. And if you increase the amount of data centres that you need, then you're really, really impacting on the amount of water that's required. So there's other things around this use of data and this use of energy that impacts on the planet. It's not just about the carbon footprint as well. And that amount of water is about the same as used by a city of 30 to 50,000 people, just sitting in one data centre. So poor design can have this environmental impact. You start off over here with all your frustrations. This translates into lots of user journeys, maybe extra time on the website, extra clicks, navigating around, trying to find out what's going on, extra user sessions, capturing data that then is stored unnecessarily, and you end up with a whole load of wasted resources. So what can we do about it? Because in the end, we need to do something, and the answer is we can start to think about how we can make our website more sustainable in design, build, development, and then ongoing care. So talking specifically about website, I've got half a dozen ideas of what you can do, and I've also sort of included links to various plugins and tools and things that we use at Indigo Tree to help us with this. And I'm sure every agency is the same. We've all got our sort of own way of doing things. So I'm just sort of giving you a flavour of what we use when we're building our WordPress websites. So one of the things we talk to our clients about is we talk to them about the connection between data and carbon footprint, but we also talk to them about their content. Do you really need that massive sitemap? And I mean, at Amnesty, obviously you've got very large sites, but then as you've said, you've also got very small sites, and it's really important, it's proportionate. Do your clients or customers really need websites with tons of pages? Or actually, is it going to be easier for their customers to just have the pages really clear navigation, really clear information architecture? And obviously we plan that in at the beginning, but then we're constantly reviewing it as well to look at what pages people engage with and what pages they just don't. And then if they're not, well, what can we do? Do we remove them? Do we need to keep all that information on there? And especially when we're doing website migrations, we look really carefully at things like the analytics. You know, if you've got blog posts going back 10 years, and some of those blog posts are relating to what you were doing in Christmas in 2012, do you really need them on your bright, shiny new website when it launches? Probably not. So that content strategy, content audit, we use a tool called Slick Plan. It's not a WordPress tool, but it's really great for sort of showing visually and presenting to clients the sort of hierarchy of pages. And typically we have 2 Slick Plans For a website, we have what they've got now, if they do have a website, and then we have what we're proposing. And then that also helps us with our sort of content migration strategy, what's being rewritten, what's being migrated, and how we can make that as optimized as possible. Because everything starts with a plan. We talk very specifically to our clients about content. One of my bugbears is Google Maps, because it really slows down the page load when it's pulled in dynamically. And a lot of the plugins that you get in WordPress, you can get a really great plugin, you can put in your address, it will display the map on the page, but the code for that plugin will be on every single blimmin' page on your website, despite the fact your actual map might only be on your contact page. So really think carefully, and what we find with our clients is a lot of the time, actually, yes, they want a map, but an image will do, clicking straight through to what the map would be in Google, and that image then can be optimized and lazy loaded if it's below the fold, and all sorts of clever things to make sure that the page load isn't impacted by Google Maps. And the same with forms. You know, think about, do you need that really long form? Do you really need to know the gender of someone who's making an inquiry at the point they make that inquiry? You can maybe able to tell by the name. You probably don't need to be collecting all that data, and it's about being proportionate. And then if you're asking for them to upload documents, well, once you've used those documents, are you actually deleting them? Do you need to be storing them? How long do you need to be storing them for? And that ties in with security and GDPR and all those sorts of things as well. So really think about it, because in my experience, clients they like to keep things just in case. But actually, how many times do you really go back and need that something that someone gave you, 2 or 3 years ago, and you probably shouldn't be saving on your public website anyway? And then the big thing for us is indexing and crawling. So, Google will index everything it finds in the XML sitemap file, ideally. But do you need everything in there? And certainly when we onboard websites that have been built, especially using some of the WordPress themes, often they'll have custom post types, and you have to go in and turn off the sitemaps. Some of the sliders, for example, they'll have a custom post type for each different slide. But actually they're embedded on a page. You don't want Google indexing the individual slides or the individual sliders. You want them only to be indexing the page. So if you use the Yoast plugin, for example, like we do, you can go in and turn off all the XML sitemaps that actually aren't required. So you haven't got those bots and crawlers crawling those pages. And then Yoast has also written a plugin called Fewer Tags. If you've got less than 10 tags in your 10 articles in your tag archive, then probably that page isn't worth being crawled by Google. And in fact, for most of our clients, we will categorize articles. They might use tags to help people navigate, but those tag pages are really low value in terms of Google search. So don't let the crawlers and the bots crawl them. Just turn them off from being crawled. Right, accessibility. Now, this is sort of tied in with sustainability, because you can do an awful lot with flat colours and design and colours and transparency. But one of the things we do, and one of the tools we use that I'm just mentioning here, is we built our own colour contrast checker, because I got fed up with getting designs from designers where the brand colours might be accessible, but as soon as you add all the tints and all the extra bits and the combinations of colours that are actually being used on the website, suddenly you end up with colour contrast issues. So we just built ourselves a little tool where you can just put in the hex or the RGB and then move the slider along, and it will literally tell you the colour combinations that our designers can use. And we normally will send them this as part of the design brief, so that if they do anything outside of this, or they add extra tints or extra colours as part of the design, we can update it and make sure we know exactly what colour combinations will pass and won't pass. And that just basically makes it a lot more simple, because we're making sure we're building things in the block editor, but we're also making sure we're using code as much as possible rather than images. And then the other plugin that we use on all of our sites when we're building them is the Equalised Digital Accessibility Checker plugin. And in fact, well, I've been talking to our engineering team in the last couple of weeks. We're not letting anything come out of sort of initial engineering development and going into any sort of QA if there's any defects, which is quite an interesting thing to try and do at that point. But it actually means that you can start to really optimize the code, because you know that you've got a code base which is fundamentally AA accessible for all the automated checks. And then any extra bits we're doing on top around design and testing with screen readers and, you know, just basic simple tests of can you tab through the site and do everything you need to do, and are the tabs in a logical order. And Graham can probably tell you a lot more about that than I know. Basically, it just means we've got a certain standard that we're reaching really early on straight after we've built that theme, and then everything else in the block editor, all the custom blocks, all the block patterns, we know that they're passing accessibility right from the get-go. In addition, that plugin has a premium version. You can set it to scan on a site once a week, and it will literally scan through the entire site. You can choose what it scans, and then it'll tell you how many defects you've got, which is great when you're training clients and they're putting in content, because if they miss out things like the alt tags, then it will just literally flag it in the editor and you can get them to fix it. And then also the other thing I quite like is if you are opening things in a new window, it can automatically put that little icon and a little bit of nice text to tell people. So again, it's just warning people, helping make the website more usable and easier for people to access. And then at the bottom, I've just put a couple of links to things that we also use. There's a really great browser extension by Axe, and then we could also, when I'm looking at sites where I'm potentially looking to quote for onboarding, we'll use things like Wave to scan certain pages of the site and just see how many defects there are, because often that's quite a good way of selling our expertise in pointing out all the issues that are wrong with the website that we can help people fix. But then coming back a bit more to sustainability, optimizing images. This is one of my bugbears, because you know, we have clients, best will in the world, they don't understand about this stuff. They take their amazing image on their high-end iPhone, they upload it to the media library because you can, and suddenly the page, it's like you're sitting there waiting for the damn thing to load. So there's things you can do. You can put Cloudflare in front of the site, you can deliver images in WebP. The core performance team have got a Performance Lab plugin that does quite a lot. We also use Perf Matters to do things like lazy loading, because yes, you want all your images to lazy load, but you don't want the images above the fold to lazy load, because otherwise people have to move their mouse to see the images when they first land on a page on the site. So there's some tweaks you sometimes have to make to get it to work as well as it possibly can. We also use TinyPNG, which when clients, we ask them to create an account, because it does 500 images for free, and then per month, and then as they upload new images to the media library, they can continue to keep them optimized as they're using them on the site as well. We're trying to make sure that we're using SVGs for things like icons, so we wouldn't be like calling third-party icon libraries like favicons and stuff like that. We'll always be trying to host things locally and talking to our clients about whether if they really do need that animated GIF, can they make it static? Can they make it a video? And certainly on mobile, sometimes we will say, fine, if you really must have that video above the fold on the homepage, that sort of fancy thing with people dancing across fields and all of that, unicorns and rainbows, then on a mobile, can we just sort of get it to fall back to an image? Because actually nobody on a mobile waits and watches one of those videos. They're always swiping down. So you know from the usability that people won't sit and wait for it. So why spank at their mobile data by forcing them to load a really large video onto the page, which they'll immediately scroll down and miss anyway. When it comes to video, if you're embedding videos on the page, a lot of the browsers won't let you autoplay videos anymore. We never advise our clients to use them in banners, but occasionally they do have a genuine business need. But if they do, we'll always have a sort of fallback image. And then if you're embedding them within the page, if they come from YouTube or Vimeo and that, just make sure they've got that sort of poster image on the front, which Perf Matters does for you in a lot of cases. There's other plugins that will do it, because it means when the page loads, the image loads, the video only loads in the background if someone actually clicks on it to play, which is really great because it means you're not loading all that video data and then someone just not clicking on it and not needing it. So it makes the pages a lot more performant. Right, fonts. I love a nice font. But how many fonts do you really need on your website? Do you really need 4 fonts in 5 different weights and styles? Is it really going to add anything to your communication and your messaging? Can you subset for languages if the site's not using fonts or characters? We often design what I would consider to be really beautiful websites with only 1 or 2 fonts. And that's absolutely fine. It's how you use them that's important and what the message is. And I know with the fonts coming in with 6.5, it's a lot easier, but you can definitely self-host your fonts. There's certainly, if your client's worried about GDPR, you shouldn't ever be calling Google for fonts. You need to be self-hosting those Google fonts. Perf Matters we've used for quite a long time now to automatically self-host fonts, but now we've built it into our sort of starter theme anyway. But and if a client wants to use Typekit, we just say no, quite frankly. We make the brand designer choose an alternative font because it's fine. There's plenty of fonts out there, and I personally think for most of our clients, especially in the small and medium-sized market, it's perfectly reasonable to go back to the brand and go, fine, you use your fancy Typekit fonts on your printed material and adverts and all that sort of thing, but actually have an alternative font for the digital and the website. Number one, you won't be paying as much if you can get a Google font compared to the paid-for fonts. And number two, will it really make that much difference to your customers? Will they genuinely not buy from you or not convert because you're using a slightly different font? They probably won't even notice unless they're a designer or a font geek, basically. So think about it in terms of what's the damage by getting the brand to have a digital version of whatever print font the designer chooses. WordPress theme. I love a theme which will work with every page builder and WooCommerce and all the different event plugins and all of that, because you know it's going to be slow. Because quite frankly, you know that every page is going to be loading up a whole load of code that isn't required. So when we talk to our clients about themes, and some of them are under the illusion that you can just go and get any old theme you like and build an amazing website, we talk to them about using the block editor rather than page builders, because quite frankly, you're just, why add that extra plugin? We talk about how we can compress the code, make sure it's really well optimized. We can reduce any dependencies on third-party libraries. And then we use things like Perf Matters to customize what code is loaded on a page. So you can either say, you know, I want all of these particular bits of code loaded on every page apart from this one, or you can say, I only want this bit of code loaded on that page. You can do all sorts of things to actually choose how you load your code so that you only load things where it's required. And of course, you're implementing caching. Like Big Byte, we use WP Engine for all our clients, so that they make our lives, they make us look good basically quite easily, because they do a lot of the heavy lifting on all the caching and the speed and performance. But that brings me on to hosting. So the Green Web Foundation has a tool where you can literally go and check if your website is hosted on green hosting. So just go and use it, and then you can put a badge on your website if you really want to, but you can be reassured that your hosting is green. And they've got a sort of, there's an API and a database of basically hosting companies that are running off green energy. Doesn't mean their energy doesn't have a carbon footprint. There's all sorts of embodied carbon in the building of the data center, the manufacturing of the servers and the devices, but it does mean it's significantly less than a data center that is running off non-green electricity, so to speak. So you've built your shiny new website, but how are you going to measure your carbon footprint? Well, there's all sorts of tools you can find if you Google. Most of them, you have to put in a URL and it will tell you how many grams of carbon what your particular visit has cost, essentially. And there's some sort of formula that you're using to essentially measure the page weight of the URL of the page you put in the tool, and it comes back with a carbon footprint for that page. And if your website is transferring less data per page, one of the benefits of it is that it will be faster. So this is, I can't tell you who the client is, but these are some stats from quite a large website we launched. It was the homepage. We launched it was actually the 2nd of April, I think it was. I was a bit annoyed because the top one is mobile and it's currently saying 92 out of 100 on performance, but that's because they added, well, the SEO company added some extra scripts after we launched it. And the bottom is desktop, so that's 99, so that's pretty good. And the accessibility isn't 100 out of 100 because there's a false positive on one particular block that we need to actually just go and fix. It is accessible, it's just that the layers of colours essentially are causing it to think that you've got black text on a dark background and it isn't, the text is actually white. So we're fairly pleased with that. We know that it will provide a much better experience for that particular client's website visitors, and it will also mean that they will use a lot less data. We launched a website earlier this year for a local charity who'd had a volunteer come employee manage their previous website. When I measured their previous website's homepage, it was 5 megabytes per visit, which was a little bit spicy for a charity working with people, you know, who potentially were economically disadvantaged. When we launched it, I think their homepage was measuring about 300 kilobytes. So we reduced it by over 90%. So that's the sort of difference that a good website theme and a good WordPress development will make. And I firmly believe you can't manage what you can't measure. So now this is my little sales pitch, which is basically my other hat, in addition to Indigo Tree, is that we started with a bit of an idea 2.5 years ago, and we've sort of accidentally ended up with a separate business and a WordPress plugin that I am expecting to sort of basically do some final beta testing on next week. We are currently monitoring at the moment the data per page per day, but we're weighting it by visitor traffic and device, and whether visitors at the moment, we're weighting it by whether they're located in the UK or across somewhere else in the world, but eventually it will be a little bit more granular on country because countries vary quite considerably in terms of how much renewables they're using. And one of the things we're looking at is how efficient the website is. So you might have a page which actually does take a lot of data because it's got some videos and loads of maybe a gallery of images and things like that. But if it doesn't get many visits, is it worth your while optimizing that page versus another page where it's getting thousands of visits a month, where even taking off 1 or 2 images or compressing something a little bit or maybe really reviewing the code, that actually might have a far bigger impact on the overall data used by your website and your overall website's carbon footprint. So we're really going at it from thinking about it from a carbon reduction point of view rather than just measuring as well. And one of the things that I'm really keen to talk to people about, and we start to talk to our clients about, is set yourself a carbon budget. You know, if a page has per visit a carbon footprint of more than a certain amount, well, what can you do to reduce it? And how are you going to measure that? And then spend your energies wisely. So, as I say, we're doing daily monitoring. You can track over time, and then you can look at individual pages in the page editor and see which pages have the lowest carbon footprint per visit. But you can also look at what the overall carbon footprint is of that page based on all the visits it's getting. And that's the key bit of data linking up with the analytics. And then in addition, we've got an extra extension to our extension that will be coming shortly, where we'll be looking at the bot traffic and search engine traffic as well that you wouldn't be measuring in your usual analytics program. So to get this far, actually, we've had lots of support, and our main funder at the moment is Amelia Capital, which is owned by Joost and his wife. And so we're working with them really closely to make sure that we really, really think about how we can make the web a lot greener. So that's me, Louise Towler from Indigo Tree and Canopy. If you go on this QR code, I'd really love it for people to sign up to our Canopy newsletter that will be starting shortly, because we're going to be launching imminently. Thank you very much.